Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Royal Chronicles. Thanks for listening to our last episode. There will be new episodes every Wednesday on Spotify and Amazon Music, and Patreon members will get early access on Tuesdays. Make sure to follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Patreon, as well as our social media pages. You'll find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram for updates on our upcoming episodes. Thanks for listening and enjoy this week's episode.
Monaco, a jewel on the French Riviera, glistening beneath the Mediterranean sun. This city-state boasts breathtaking views, hillsides sprinkled with opulent villas, and luxurious yachts floating in its harbor. Monaco is probably best known for its glamorous casino, the Monte Carlo Grand Prix, and the reign of Rainier III, and his marriage to the American actress Grace Kelly. But there's much more to this city-state than you might have heard. A history stretching back thousands of years through many different rules. But our focus today is on the House of Grimaldi and their reign in this tiny state.
Okay, welcome back to episode 2. Last week, we were in England exploring the life and legacy of Richard III and how his story did not fully come to an end until the 21st century. If you didn't have a chance to listen to that one, I encourage you to go back and listen. It's a lot of fun. Today, though, however, we find ourselves in the beautiful, glamorous French Riviera.
Yes.
We're in the Principality of Monaco.
Perfect timing since we're moving into fall.
Isn't it?
To go to the warm and sunny beaches.
Yes, as the rich and famous often do. I'm excited about this one today because I absolutely love the story, the history of Monaco. It's fascinating. It as you said in the beginning, most people tend to think of, when they think of Monaco, they tend to think of usually the 20th century. We're talking about Rainier III, Grace Kelly, and I love that story. It's really sweet, but this particular nation, tiny as it is, a micronation, its history stretches back to, I'm going to say 600 BC, essentially.
Not in the same form, but people have been living there. And
yes.
It's pretty much an independent area. Yes.
And that's not something you often hear about when people discuss Monaco.
Yeah, it's a real survivor of a state.
Exactly. So you can tell this story better than I can. How it is, because today we're focusing on the House of Grimaldi and how it is that they came to be the rulers of this tiny, beautiful little place. But tell us the story of how it is that they came to be there.
So this is just going to be the quick version of the story, but the Grimaldis were originally a noble family in the Republic of Genoa in northern Italy. During a civil war that Genoa was experiencing, they picked the wrong side and were forced to leave. One of the members of the family took his followers and attacked the citadel on the Rock of Monaco that was being held by the same political party that they had been fighting back in their home. So his plan was to dress himself and his followers up as monks, sneak into the castle and take over. And it worked. And they've basically been ruling there ever since.
It's very creative.
With only short little interludes. That's
true. And it's funny because I didn't put these two things together initially, that the story of dressing up like monks, it's the crest.
Yes,
of
it's
Monaco,
their family coat of arms.
The two men on either side, they're dressed as monks, no?
Yeah, with swords.
Yeah, I just...
Because that's why they have IP badge now.
I mean, it's just a creative way to just swoop in and take over your own little, I was going to say kingdom, but not.
Yeah, it's also funny because the side they were on in the Civil War back in Genoa, they were on the side that supported the Pope. So they've always been very closely tied to the Catholic Church.
Oh, yes.
And their family words are "with God's help."
Oh, that's true. Yes. I do want to, at this point, encourage everyone who would like to know more about, let's say, the ancient history of Monaco, far back, before what we're going to be talking about today. There's a really interesting book. it was published in the mid 1800s. I don't remember the exact date. It was written by someone named H. Pemberton. That's the author on the book, and it's simply entitled "The History of Monaco, Past and Present." I know it's available for purchase, but it's also available online on the U.S. archives. It's been scanned in, so you can read it for free if you're interested. It starts way back in the beginning, like I was saying, around 600 BC, and goes all the way up to the point of when it was published. But that's going to be before the time period we're talking about today. So just putting that out there. If you want to know more about the more ancient history, I highly recommend that resource. Okay, but for our purposes today, as you mentioned in the intro, Luke, most people, when they think of Monaco, they think of the casinos, the Grand Prix, the beautiful ocean. But if we're talking about the royal family, most people think of Rainier III, and then, of course, Grace Kelly, who became Princess Consort of Monaco, mid-50s. But I don't think many people know or are aware of the fact that she was not the first American to marry into the family or to be Princess of Monaco.
Yeah, I hadn't heard this story before either.
Really?
I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the 19th century in this part of the world anyway, so it was all new to me.
Well, strap in, because here we go. Her name was Alice Hine. I believe that's how you pronounce her name. I've only ever read it. I've never heard it pronounced. But we start with her in stateside. She was born in New Orleans, Louisiana in 1857. And she was born to a well-to-do family of French heritage. I think her mother was actually Creole, which, I mean, same thing, more or less. Her father was a well-to-do banker or in finance of some sort like that. And she was born in the U.S. in New Orleans, but due to the outbreak of the Civil War here in the U.S., her father took the family and went to France, and that's where she, finished growing up and all of that. Fun fact: it is supposedly said that her godparents were Napoleon III and what was his wife's name? Empress.
Oh, Eugenie.
Yes, Eugenie. Thank you. So those were her godparents. So she was born into and grew up in very well-to-do, aristocratic circles.
And the whole time period and relationship between the American French or formerly French colonies between the French Revolution and the 19th century, I mean, at least this period of history, is very interesting because it's sort of like a tennis match. They'll be run out of France and they'll flee to the American former French possessions, and then they'll go back to France, and then sometimes they'll come back. It's kind of back and forth, running away from wars,
which gives us these fabulous stories to tell hundreds of years later.
Yes.
Right. But so she grows up in France, I think predominantly in Paris, and she's married at a very young age to an aristocrat. He's the Duke. I'm going to butcher this, and I apologize from the beginning. The Duke of, did we decide it's Richelieu?
I think so.
Yes.
Richelieu.
We're going to go with that. The 7th Duke of Richelieu. They're married in 1875. They have 2 children. But by 1880, sadly, her husband passes away. She's only 22 at this point.
They'd only been married 5 years and 2 children. 2
children. She's 22. He passes away and she's on her own. I believe it's not until, no, actually she meets Prince Albert I in 1879, which is, I guess, a year or some months before her first husband passes away, who at the time is still married to his first wife, Lady Mary Victoria Douglas Hamilton. It's a mouthful. And I think you suspected that she was Scottish, and we looked into it. And
when you have Douglas and Hamilton in your name, you've got to be related to like half of Scotland.
Right. So admittedly, neither one of us had much knowledge about her. So looking into it, we discovered that she was Prince Albert's first wife. She was the mother of their children.
So the
son,
the ancestress of the current line.
Yes. But it's it's connected to current day because okay, I'm gonna try to get this straight. I wrote down notes so that when you get into these aristocratic and noble bloodlines, you have to make notes. She was the maternal second cousin of Louis Mountbatten, who was the maternal grandfather of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. As we know, the
Queen
husband
Elizabeth's husband.
of the late Queen Elizabeth II, making her what to King Charles III?
Ooh,
Maternal grandfather.
they're related.
They're
somewhere in
related.
there.
We're just gonna put it like
But
that.
All
That's
these
the
people
connection.
are really, but yeah, she's the one we found. So
That's the connection we found to the current monarch of the UK, of
Yes.
England. Anyway, moving on. I thought that was interesting because,
Yeah, it
like you
is.
say, at some point, if you connect the dots far enough, they'll all come together.
And since she's a part of the Hamilton family from Scotland, that means that she's related to Alexander Hamilton from the founding fathers.
Oh, my
he was
goodness.
an illegitimate descendant of the family.
I just learned something right here, right now. Did not know that. So where did we leave off in the story? So Alice meets Prince Albert a little bit before her first husband dies, but Prince Albert is still married to his first wife. It was said, fairly well documented, that they were unhappy, and the marriage is annulled in 1880. Funny enough, the same year Alice's first husband dies. Nothing to do with one or the other. And it's annulled because being Catholic, divorce is not permitted, and so it's annulled within the church and all that.
Which seems awkward that they have two children, because aren't annulments only supposed to work if, you haven't really been like living together?
See, that's what I thought. But
I guess if you get the right paperwork done, it all works.
I don't want to get into the weeds on this. But anyway, so Albert and Alice began a relationship very shortly after his first marriage is annulled. But they don't get married until, gosh, it's
1889?
a good 9 years later. And the reason for that is because the current prince at the time, his father, objected to their relationship, to their marriage, on the grounds that she was Jewish, even though she had converted to Catholicism on the marriage, the marriage to her first husband.
Was she Jewish on her father's side?
I believe.
Because if her mother was Creole, then
I'd have to go back and look.
Anyway,
Either
that's
way,
something else to look into.
She's Jewish on at least one side of her family. And so Albert's father objects on that basis, even though she's not really a practicing Jew, she's Catholic. Anyway, so there's this whole drama going on with that. So he objects to it. Well, Albert is patient and Alice is patient. They wait 9 years. And I believe it's like a month after the death of Albert's father, they get married.
Love conquers
Albert's father, Prince Charles II. Yes, love conquers all. It's funny you say that because the director of the Monaco Palace Archives, I forget his name, but he points out that this is considered to be what's the first love marriage amongst, in the principality amongst the Grimaldis. That wasn't something, most of the time with royalty and
dynastic
aristocrats,
marriages.
It's marriages of, it has to do with money and consolidating power and influence and all of that. So apparently this marriage was a love marriage. They waited 9 years and all the rest of it.
Other places called, what they call it,
like an arranged marriage. Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Like within the lords and dukes and all of that.
So, and fun fact, Albert I, his father, Prince Charles, did I say the second earlier? It's Prince Charles III, not Charles III of England, Monaco. Monte Carlo was named for him.
Yes.
I did not know that originally, but there you go. So at this point, they're married. They never have any children together. So as we discussed earlier, the current line, Albert II, who is the current Prince of Monaco, that comes from Albert I and his first wife. But Alice is credited, and this is where I find it interesting, the comparisons, that she's an American who marries the Prince of Monaco, becomes the Princess of Monaco. Later on, you have the whole story with Grace Kelly. Well, Alice is largely credited because she came with a huge amount of money. I believe her dowry was somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 million, which back then was a lot
Tons
of money. And apparently her jewelry collection was substantial enough that it's mentioned in the history books regarding the amount of the money that she brought with her. Yes.
Yeah.
So she is largely credited with kind of helping to put the principality on a more sound financial footing. She was said to be quite intelligent in that way, savvy. And but then she went on to devote a lot of her time and energy to developing Monaco as a center of, the culture, the arts, and things like that,
and tourism.
Yes. And then you had Grace Kelly all those years later, who that was a lot of, I know she did other things, but she focused a lot on the arts and all that, which I know she was an actress, but it's funny that the two American princesses, that was their focus. So
yeah, and she was building up on the foundation of that would have been her husband's grandmother, who she was the one who came up with the plan of establishing the casino in Monaco.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're just kind of building on it and trying to make it more of a destination.
And that was a huge turning point for Monaco, the casino. Did you know originally, and I need to get more into this, maybe one of our listeners knows and they can tell us, that originally, and for quite some time thereafter, Monegasques, which are the people native to Monaco, were not permitted to work in the casino.
Yes. Yeah. So they have some very interesting policies about the casinos and actual Monegasque citizens.
Mm-hmm.
The plan was to shield the state from the kind of losses that a lot of local governments suffer when they bring casinos in, because you have, all this money coming into your area, but it also tends to drain money from your citizens.
Mm.
So their plan was to just beat that trap by not allowing any of their citizens to even go in the casinos.
Mm.
So that all the money coming in would be from foreigners and it would just be pure profit.
I could see the thought process, but I don't know. I don't think that's the policy any longer.
As far as I know, the policy is that they are not allowed to gamble in the casinos.
Can't gamble in your own country. Which, and I'm just throwing this in there because it fascinates me every time I think about it. The entire micro state or, city state, micronation of Monaco can comfortably fit inside Central Park.
Yes.
In New York. Think about that. It blows my mind.
And if you look at the shape of the country, it looks like a praying giraffe.
Oh man, now I can't unsee that. My God.
It was too weird to not mention. I just noticed it. It's like there.
It's like Italy is a boot.
Yes.
Monaco is a praying giraffe. Wow. Okay. Didn't plan on putting, having that in this conversation.
I actually saw that in someone else's video on YouTube a few years ago.
Yeah.
Well, credit is due. Are you looking it up right now?
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
you can see it.
Yeah,
That's
you can
hilarious.
see the
Like-
neck.
Anyway, moving on to the history, the serious history.
Oh, we're here for all of it. We're here for all of it. The history, the scandal, the drama. At least I am.
The cartoon country shapes.
Yeah. So do you know there is only, I believe, correct me, you know more of these solid facts than I do. There is only one city-state micronation that's smaller than Monaco.
The Vatican?
And that's right, isn't it? Vatican City?
Yes, it's
Right.
the smallest.
Because I know
Sovereign
there's a few other,
state.
just talking of micronations. There's San Marino,
Yes.
and I feel like I'm missing one.
There's
Or two.
Liechtenstein.
Yes, they're classified as that.
Mhm.
They have about the same population as Monaco. It's like 36,000-ish, right?
I'm not certain.
Or is
on
that
numbers.
the number of native Monegasque? That might be what I'm thinking of.
Mm. because they've got a lot of vertical real
though.
estate there.
That's true. Oh, that reminds me. We have to, at some point, we need to talk about their land reclamation program.
Yeah, and we could do that now because that started pretty close to this time period.
Yeah, that's the first, I guess, the beginning of that was back at this point in the late 1800s, and it's continued to this day. I mean, I read an article a few weeks ago talking about that program and what they're doing with it, and I forget how much land basically has been created from filling in the sea around.
But I mean, you do what you have to do when your country can fit inside of Central Park.
Exactly. And when it, I believe, is and this is just, I don't know if this is accurate, is the most expensive real estate. It's certainly in the top, 5 or 10, like in the whole world.
I believe it.
Yeah. And there's just not enough for all the people that want it. So yeah, they're basically creating land out of the ocean by filling it in with whatever it is and creating solid land to build on. I don't know that I would want to live on that. Would you?
I'm sure it's solid. So, back to our story.
Yes. I got you distracted. I'm so sorry. So we were at Alice, the Princess of Monaco,
and Prince Albert.
Yes, Prince Albert I.
They just got married.
They did.
And she brought all of her cash.
All of her cash and jewels and all that good stuff. And she helps the principality to become more financially sound. She develops and encourages the opera, theater, ballet in particular also. And then this is a story of, when people say opposites attract. Well, this is definitely one of those stories, because Alice is known to be just a social butterfly. I mean, she's extremely outgoing.
A Southern belle.
Yes. But then you have Albert, who was known to be more of a man of science. He was very much a trailblazer in the field of oceanography, funny enough. He established, and I believe it's still there, it's what's known as the Oceanographic Museum of Monaco. It's another thing I read about recently. There was something going on with that they do over there, oceanography. So that was his passion. He went on many I guess voyage, sailing around, studying this and that. So you kind of have it in your mind that he's this very scientific, cerebral sort of person. I think a little bit more reserved, a little less extroverted. And then she's just, as you say, the Southern belle, outgoing, loves all this fun, artsy stuff. So you have these very, very polar opposite personalities. Despite all that, it really was, I guess we would say, a love connection. There's another book that I guess I'd put out there. I haven't read the whole thing, but it's interesting enough that I guess I'll mention it. It's called The Grimaldis of Monaco. And the author in that book asserts that it was very much a love marriage. They loved each other. They got along. It was a good match, or it seemed to be. And this is where things are going to get a little juicy, a little interesting. And I guess we could go on with that, or we could take a minute to talk about On This Day in Royal History, and then get on to the fun
drama.
stuff, the drama. Yes.
Okay.
As it's percolating over here in the corner.
So what do we have for On This Day in Royal History?
So on this day, November the 1st, it is November the 1st, right? Yes.
Yes.
I'm just kidding with you. So the first one is in 1179, basically in the same area that we are for the episode, in France. Philip II is crowned King of France. And it's my understanding that he's the first monarch to style himself as King of France.
Very neat.
Right.
Yeah. So he also went by the title Philip Augustus, called that because He was known for reclaiming a lot of the power and the land that the French kings had given up over the course of several generations and reestablishing them as like a real power in the state of France. He also went on a crusade with Richard the Lionheart, the King of England, and
another
also
Richard of
tried
England.
to make his son the King of England by invading.
Oh, that's right. Just a little side note, little tidbit. Oh my gosh. There's so many stories like that though throughout royal history.
Oh yes.
It's
especially when
funny.
like two different families have a beef with each other and they just keep messing with each other for a couple generations.
What's that famous the warring families like in the hills of, I'm gonna say West Virginia or something over here.
The Hatfields and the McCoys.
Yes, that's it's like the more elegant, the wealthier version.
Where they can just send other people out to fight each other. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to 1894. And this is somewhat appropriate because
the last of the czars.
Yes, we're going to be doing an episode on this fairly soon, I think.
In the next couple weeks, yeah.
Hoping to do a kind of a more original take on it. Updates to come on that one. But in 1894, Nicholas II becomes the Tsar of Russia. And as you pointed out, on the day he became Tsar, there were how many thousands of people that were,
There was a large tragedy involving free things being given away and people stampeding each other. It was not a good day for anyone.
There was chaos and tragedy as he became Tsar. There was chaos and tragedy at the end of his life, sadly.
Yes.
It's like bookends.
And if you want to be, and if you were a real superstitious person at the coronation, you could just see all sorts of signs and omens. It was a weird day.
Well, we'll talk about that in the episode. Don't give it away.
Okay.
But anyway, I think most people, at least when I say most people, I'm generally speaking about people in the U.S. Nicholas II is probably the most well-known of all monarchs in Russia because of how the family ended and the Romanovs and all that, don't you think?
Plus, I mean, he's the last czar, so what comes after him is the Soviet Union. And I mean, it's like, the Cold War and the US versus the USSR and that whole thing. So his reign is like the beginning of the Russia is the scary enemy on the other side of the world.
But that, when we do the episode about them in some way, shape, or form, we're going to be able to connect it a little bit to our first episode because it's going to deal with DNA testing and the British monarchy. Yes. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, some of you may, but if you don't know, just, stay tuned. We'll get to it. Okay. It's interesting.
So a question about Monaco. So are they part of France? I know they're a kingdom by themselves, but do they have French citizenship?
They are a sovereign nation, even though they're tiny. They're called a microstate. They're a principality because it's a prince. There's if it was a king, it'd be a kingdom, but since there's no king, it's a principality. They have been at times in their history like a protectorate of France. Today, as it exists, they are completely sovereign, except that their defense is provided by the French.
Yes.
And some other things. I mean, that is their closest partner. They're also very closely connected with Italy, but it's mostly France. My understanding, this is just a little interesting from my legal background, that in Monaco, they don't have a law school. Obviously, I don't know where they would fit one, for one thing.
I mean, I've seen the map, like you see the map and how small it is.
Yeah.
National Museum of Anthropology, Exotic Garden, Cathedral, Casino.
Yeah, the whole
and the port.
The whole country is one. It's just a city. That's it. Yeah. So as I was saying, with their legal system, if you are, and I'm sure there's other technicalities that I'm missing, but the point is they don't have their own law school. So if you are practicing law in Monaco, you were trained and whatever in France, which it's a departure from the legal system that I'm used to, which comes from England and of course the US, but it's just, that's how closely connected they are with France and the French.
That's interesting.
I watch soccer and there's one club I like. It's called Monaco FC.
Yeah, that's their football club.
Map, it's like right on the Mediterranean Sea. But they play in the French league.
Yeah, I mean it's yes, that's how
Like even
they
though they are
do.
different
Mhm.
from France, but they're part of the French league, which
Yeah.
reminds me of like how Catalonia and like Barcelona and Spain,
Mhm.
they're trying to be their own state, their own country. Every time they had an issue with the king, like till now, they will go out in the streets with yellow and red flags to represent
Yeah.
Catalan.
Yeah,
like,
it's kind of like that, except Monaco is definitely its own nation, and it's
but
you
it's
know its
under the
own.
French protection.
Not. I wouldn't phrase it that way. They voluntarily, as a sovereign nation, are allowing France to provide
Military protection.
and
So
defense.
yeah, it's like basically, if you mess with them, you mess with France. In a way.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's a good segue, kind of. Because getting back to the historical context of all of this. All right, so now that we've
Didn't they film Iron Man 2 racing over there in Monaco?
probably
Where
Yes.
they
Elon
filmed a
Musk?
lot of stuff over
They
there.
had Elon Musk, because I remember the ocean racetrack.
Mhm.
I could do a whole separate like some special episode for Patreon on the cinematic, the filmmaking that's gone on over. I
Yes.
love all of that. I love it. Because this episode, we're not talking about Grace Kelly as much as I want to, because I absolutely adore her. But there, we wanted to get into the lesser known stories of Monaco.
See,
So
one of the questions about Monaco just popped up. It said, "Can Monaco play in the soccer World Cup?"
mm-hmm.
And it says they are not. Monaco is not a member of FIFA or the European Football Association, so they cannot enter the FIFA World Cup. But France can and take players from Monaco.
They probably don't have enough
they
players to have
a club, but
like their own national team.
they're not
members of FIFA.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
says
know. I
they're
have no
not
idea.
Part of the Football Federation or the European Federation, so they cannot participate as a country.
Mm-hmm.
But if they have players from Monaco, they can go play in France and join the French team.
That makes sense. Yeah. That's true of a lot of things. I think and this comes from another book. I don't remember the author's name, but I know it's called Once Upon a Time. And that if you like to read about the story of Rainier III and Grace Kelly and their family and that whole part of history, I highly recommend that book. I got it as an audiobook, and it's fun to listen to. The author doesn't really get into the history we're talking about here, but I mention it because he mentioned something about the royal family, or the princely family, as I think they're technically supposed to be called. They have like a little country house sort of place that's it's in France, because once you're outside,
Yes.
where are they going to put a country house in Monaco? There's no place for that. That doesn't work. So that's how intertwined they are.
Randy
Tamborelli. Okay, yeah, I liked it. I really enjoyed that.
Once Upon a Time behind the fairy tale of Princess Grace.
Yes, it's interesting. Okay, so now that we've done our little rabbit trail and on this day in world history, it was great fun, guys. Don't get me wrong, but it's on to the juicy stuff of this story today. Are you ready for it?
Let's go.
Okay, and I checked my sources to make sure it wasn't just like Wikipedia rumors or something. No. So, as I mentioned earlier, the marriage between Albert I and Alice, the Princess of Monaco, was a love marriage. It wasn't arranged, anything of that nature. It seemed to go well for a while until, and I'm not straight on who did what first. It's kind of a Prince Charles, Princess Diana sort of situation. But Prince Albert is seen in the company of a courtesan. Okay. And I'm not going to use the...
however you want to say it.
the more, I don't know, distasteful term. Let's say a high society lady of the night. Okay. Who later on would write very fondly of him in her memoirs. As you do. As one does as a high society lady of the night flyer or whatever. And so because of this, and I think it's pretty much understood that, he was keeping company with this lady and all that. So, I mean, that was a thing that was going on. So Alice gets wind of it and has her banned from the principality. Well, you feel bad for her until you continue on with the story, and find that for Alice's part, it's also alleged that she had a relationship with a man named, I believe it's Isidore de Laura, who was an English composer of operas and other things like that. And this is where it gets, like I said, juicy. So supposedly, allegedly, the affair between Alice and Delora resulted in Albert slapping her across the face in public at the Opera House in Monte Carlo.
Yikes.
Right? Well, we're talking, I don't know, what's that show on TV? Desperate Housewives of such and such place.
The Real Housewives?
Thank you. Real Housewives of, I don't know, wherever. Of Monte Carlo. The Real Housewives of Monte Carlo. So there's all that drama going on. I guess it should come as no surprise to any of us that after that, I think it's in 1902, Alice and Albert, they separate. But oddly, they never divorce or have it annulled or anything like that. They remain legally married. But Albert basically banned Alice from the principality. And but they remain married for the next, I guess, 20 years until Albert passes away in 1922. And Alice just kind of goes on to live her best life. I want to say in, I think, London.
Oh.
Known for her parties and outgoing attitude and all of that.
So it sounds like the opposites attract eventually kind of wore off and it drove them apart.
I guess so. Who knows what else was going on behind the scenes?
Never know.
You like to throw that out there. Anytime we're talking about these people, I mean, I think it should go without saying that none of us really know who they were and what really all went on. I mean, I consider myself something of a royal watcher, but you have to take what you hear with a grain of salt because nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. But this much we do know. So that's kind of the end of her story, sadly. But it was entertaining, at least. Yeah, she got to remain Princess of Monaco for the rest of her life. I believe it's on her tombstone. After she leaves the principality, I guess around 1902, I don't know when exactly she moved out for the last time. But Albert would then see some trouble in his rule because in, I guess it's the early part of 1910, there were, and okay, this is the phrase that I read. However, it seems funny to apply it to anything that happens in Monaco. There were mass protests.
All 20 of them.
Mass protests against his rule.
No offense to any of people from Monaco.
No, I mean no offense whatsoever.
Couldn't be that much room for a mass protest.
It's just a matter of numbers, okay? That's all. So there's mass protests against his rule because I believe up to this point, he's still considered an absolute monarch.
Yes.
And so at this point, I guess the Monegasques kind of had enough of that. So they demanded a constitution.
Well, everyone else had a constitution.
Yeah,
they didn't want to be left out.
I can understand that. A little bit of FOMO of the constitution ship that's sailing away. You want to catch that. So anyway, they demand a constitution and they want their parliament to reign in the absolute monarchy. That is Albert I. Or else, get this, they would overthrow him and establish a republic. See, that's another influence of the French. What did the French do? Yeah, we haven't gotten to that in another episode, but it's all fairly well known, So they were threatening to go all what's
guillotine.
Yes, or what's the name in A Tale of Two Cities? Everybody's name, is it Jacques or something?
Yes.
They're threatening to go all Jacques on him, and so, but they're all part of it. Speaking of France, was that they were also dissatisfied with France's domination of their politics and their economy, and they wanted to be more
independent.
Yes, more their own thing, which is kind of that's a back and forth, give and take thing that goes on with them for a lot of their history.
And especially in this time period, that was just kind of in the air. I mean, it's right before World War One. You've got all of the, ethnic nationalist movements going on all over Europe. It's just kind of something that was going around.
Yeah, well, and part of it, we already talked about how the Monegasques were not permitted to work in the casinos. At this point, it seems hard to imagine because of the way that it is now. But at this point, they had really bad unemployment. And I mean, it's a tiny little place. So they don't have farmland. They don't have factories. They don't have like industry.
And they can't even work at
they can't work at the casinos. So everyone, they've just.
The bays or like boats
so you either work at the dock or you're a tour guide at one of the museums.
They have reached their limits.
Or wait like the whole year when they have a Formula One racing, someone clean the car.
Oh my gosh.
Sell tickets. So fun fact about Monte Carlo.
Oh, here we go. Rabbit trail. Get ready, people. Rabbit trail. It's okay. Continue.
When we were, like, I was a kid and back home, some people probably from the listeners knows what a radio is. New generation doesn't know what's radio. We had a radio channel called
I feel
Monte
insulted.
Carlo in Arabic.
Oh.
There's a fact about it. Then started, like, first time aired 1972, 51 years ago. It stayed till now. It's aired from Cyprus.
Oh, okay.
But
Cyprus?
Yeah. But as a FM wave. And it's been owned by a French media.
But it's called Monte Carlo. That's
Monte
interesting.
Carlo. But it's owned by French media. And first time it says, like, on the information here I see, it's a French public radio service. But they just named it Monte Carlo.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. And they changed the name from Radio Monte Carlo to be Monte Carlo Dualia, which is international. It covers on the Thursday from Morocco all the way to Iraq, all the Middle East.
Fun. Well, there's a lot of French speakers in the Middle East too. I mean, Morocco,
North of Africa, yeah,
Lebanon, Syria, yeah.
But like they even covered like it says Saudi Arabia, Sudan. I don't know if it's down.
I never heard of that.
I don't think so.
Go figure.
Yeah, but and it says like produces the programs and everything was recorded in Paris.
Oh.
And
fun little factoid.
And now it covers in FM, shortwaves, satellite, and it's on our website.
I have no idea what you just said. I'm too young.
Like,
radio, I don't understand what we're talking about.
You know what's radio is.
I'll never give up my age. Not here. What's a
it's
radio?
A fun fact to know, like again, in Monte Carlo, from Monaco, but owned by French media, run by the French media.
Yep, they're very intertwined.
All the studios were in Paris. But kind of a cop. We will use your name. You know?
Well, and there could be another Monte Carlo. It just means Mount Charles. So there could be one in Cyprus, or it could be another one in France. So I mean,
but who knows? So the mass protests, or whatever, the beginning of 1911, Prince Albert grants a constitution. Some say that it didn't have a lot of teeth to it, but in terms of like lessening the absolutism of his rule, I think it assisted with that. No, yeah, because
lay down some parameters.
Yeah, that was basically the end of the absolute monarchy as it existed at that time and prior to that time. Yeah, so that
mass protests work.
Yeah, go out there and demand your rights or something like that. Okay, and so we get to something that we've mentioned, and I'm sure everyone has heard about this, but Prince Albert created the Monte Carlo Rally, which is it's an automobile race, and it was designed to attract tourists to Monaco and the casino.
Featured in Iron Man 2.
Yes, it's now called the Grand Prix.
And other films.
Yes. I love Formula racing. I really do. I'm not much into sports or really even cars for that matter, but I've really always loved Formula racing for a long time. You're not really into that though.
Not really.
That's okay. We can still get along.
Guess it started with the race near our hometown, the 12 Hours of Sebring.
Yes, which I believe way back at one time was 24 hours.
It was,
but then they changed it.
It was like right when we moved to the area, they stopped doing 24.
That it's on, and it is on my bucket list. I will one day go to see the 24 hours of Le Mans.
Oh yes,
or Le Mans, depending on how you want to say it.
Daytona 500 and start raining and they cancel the race.
Oh no. We can't have that kind of bad luck. No. Yeah, but Formula is so different from any like Indy racing, NASCAR. It's nothing like that to me. It's just so elegant and I don't know, complex.
And also the challenge because it's all the different divisions and they're all racing at the same time.
I love it, but that's just me. So we're kind of coming to the end of our story today.
We kind of rambled a little bit in
We
there,
did,
but we covered a lot of interesting stuff.
It's fun. I feel like this is the type of stuff that people never hear about Monaco, and there's so much more than what we've talked about here. This is just a little teeny bit of their history. Albert's reign, Albert the First, his reign would come to an end, of course, upon his death, and he was succeeded by his son, Louis II. And in our previous episode, I recall that I expressed a degree of surprise at the idea of a grandchild succeeding a grandparent, but then you pointed out that it's more common than maybe we realize, and so this is one of those instances. Apparently, Louis II would later on be succeeded by his grandson, Rainier III. Because, and this is another little spicy little bit, his daughter, Charlotte, the hereditary princess, had ceded her succession rights to her son, Louis II.
Women couldn't inherit back then in Monaco, right?
No. So the story was that Charlotte was born of out of wedlock.
Oh.
And was then later, as an adult, I think she was like 20 years old, was technically adopted by her biological father, the prince.
Oh.
But then he adopted her, and so she then, had the title and the rights and all that, but she gave it to her son.
That's interesting.
Isn't it?
I had never heard about that.
Yeah. Can look more into that too, but it's just another little, thing.
Question for you, bro. How much do you think the prize money for Monaco
Grand Prix? I feel like I should know this.
I'm gonna guess a lot.
It's like a really rich.
I don't know, $50 million. It's probably, I don't know. Or is it euro? It's probably euro.
Oh,
50 million euro.
Yeah, that sounds good. 50 million. Yeah.
Okay.
No prize money for the F1 crown jewel race in the Monaco Grand Prix. And instead, what they do, the whole money goes to the whole team, distributed based on their positions. But there's no prize money.
Oh my gosh. That's such a letdown.
And funny thing, I was just looking.
It's like I was going to get chocolate cake and somebody gave me carrots or something.
They do 78 laps.
Yeah.
And it's like around 2 miles. 78 laps in the heat, June, or maybe do it for free. Just probably.
Oh, the prestige.
I think it's one of those things where
if
you're racing to win money, you're not rich enough to be in this race. I think that's what they're saying.
If you need the money,
everyone.
you don't belong here. If you need the money,
you really should be racing in someone else's
And we were
race.
talking about this. How many of the participants and the drivers are from royal households? Many of them.
Or at least just super rich.
It might as well be.
Yeah.
Or have been in the past. Yeah.
Over there, and McLaren is going to have the most wins, 15
wins. It's funny. You pointed out something in the title, something about crown jewel something. What was it?
It's called Crown Jewel Race.
Yeah, I find that interesting because you know what I'm about to say. In Monaco,
yes, the crown.
They don't have a crown. There hasn't been one. Rumor is that Napoleon absconded with it way back in the day, and it never showed back up again. So Monaco does not have a crown, and therefore, when the prince, there's no coronation because coronation implies there's a crown. They're enthroned. It's called an enthronement rather than a coronation in Monaco.
And the other
That's
thing
cool.
Is the tickets are cheap for the.
We're back on the race. He can't get over it.
I'm just looking. The tickets are $200 for the stand. like so the standing room is $200. Then start going out VIP seats 500 to $1,000, and then the VIP pass is $3,000.
Well, buy me a plane ticket and pack a bag because we're going.
Sure, yeah.
If you can just afford that €300 hotel room.
That's the kicker
A
right
night.
there. No. I've said that for my bucket list, the 24 hours of Le Mans, I'd be willing to take like a sleeping bag and sleep on the side of the track, as people, I don't know if they still do that, but it's been
Camp
done.
out on the side of the road in a tent.
I'm all down for that. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our trip today through the French Riviera, through the micro nation of Monaco.
Our meandering journey through Monaco's history.
Yes, but I really feel that we've gotten more into the spirit of what we want to be doing here on this podcast in this episode. A little more lighthearted, but still plenty of the history, but a little more fun.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay, well, thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, which we really hope that you did, please make sure to check us out on Patreon, because as we are a new production, we are really going to be looking to produce additional content to put on our channel and Patreon. Probably not only will you get exclusive or early access to the episodes that we post here, but we're hoping to produce additional episodes for members only. You can find us of course, on Spotify and Amazon Music as well. But definitely check out our Patreon, because we're going to be adding stuff as time goes by. Additional episodes, maybe some fun Q&As, I don't know, trivia contests. Votes, yes.
It's like tournaments.
Exactly. So there's going to be some fun stuff.
Anyone have a suggestion?
Yes. If there's a topic you'd like us to discuss, I don't know, a particular family or time in history, or just kind of a country in general. It can be general or really specific. Definitely let us know. Okay, so thanks so much again for joining us. Our next episode will be next Wednesday. Same time, same place. It'll be uploaded at 5 a.m. Eastern time. We really hope to see you then. Till next time.
Bye.
The Royal Chronicles is written and produced by Hannah Mohana and Luke Haney. Executive producer Mustafa Mohana.